Hey, before we get into today's episode, if you're a podcast host or guest, listen up. I've produced over 200 podcast episodes and guested on 50 podcasts just in 2025 alone. And let me tell you, nothing grows your audience or builds trust faster than being in front of the right listeners. That's why I created my podcast tour offer. I'll help you map out your topics, strategize your message, and find you the most aligned podcasts and audiences to get you and your business in front of. So if you've ever thought, I just wish more eyes were on my work, this is your sign. Let's get you on a podcast tour. You can find all the details in the show notes. Just look for podcast tour. Now let's dive into today's episode. Welcome back to the podcast. I have a special guest today, but we're doing things a little differently. We're going to dive into sort of a mini coaching session. I want to welcome Josephine and thank you for letting me do this. You've been a speaker. You speak on a regular basis, and this is going to be really fun to add to what you already do. So welcome.
Thank you.
Go ahead and tell the audience, what is it that you do? Give me a little background of your business and who you help.
My name is Josephine, but most call me Josie. I am an individual couples and family therapist in Denver, Colorado. I specialize in working with folks going through life transitions and trauma. So the spiel that we like to give is that we help individuals, couples, and families who've carried trauma simply for being who they are. And we help them move through big changes with clarity, support, and stronger relationships, often for the very first time.
Such an impactful job and vocation that you have. And I'm so glad to hopefully be a part of helping you spread this message. This is great. Yes. I like to start with speaking topics. You already have a really good handle on your expertise and the niche pieces that you have. And so we get to kind of jump a little further in the process that I do with my clients. And that's more of the strategy part. So I want to start with asking you, what would be your goal? We can sort of think about your business as well. What would make sense, specifically speaking on podcasts and how that would impact your business? What do you see as far as that consistency, and what would be your intention business related to utilizing that type of platform?
That's a really good question. So I own a group practice, actually. And the backbone and the mission of me being a group practice is that I want clinicians to come in when they are coming out of graduate school and they haven't gotten their license yet. They're in that like in-between sort of state where they're still in some level of training, but they've graduated. And once they're licensed, I kick them out. So all the folks on my team know that there will be a point where I look at them and I say, you're ready.
It's time to go.
And a huge part of that is preparing my brand to be able to stand on its own without folks automatically associating the brand with just me. Because I was solo for quite some time. And when I was doing those podcasts, I was solo. That was one of the big changes. And I now want the brand to be able to stand a bit on its own well, which I think it does. And in that process, be able to have whoever is coming in be able to speak to the mission of the brand and be aligned with it without it necessarily having to be me. So I want to be able to have the brand have its own sense of recognition.
Okay, I love that. And you would really be talking more to clinicians?
Necessarily.
Okay.
And I have told my team this. I hope that they build the confidence to not only network with other therapists, but to put themselves in front of their ideal clients. And I think podcasts is a way to do that, especially since many of the folks who come through my practice, I've had a few folks, I guess now 3, 4, come in and go on to do whatever it is that they want to do. And some of that for some folks includes being in private practice and owning their own businesses. So I'm going in with the mindset of you're coming into this group practice to learn, to train, and to be able to eventually build your own brand so that you're able to stand on your own 2 feet. Because that's in and of itself a life transition, moving from being someone who's in training to someone who holds expertise. And that's something that I want to model, not just for the clinicians to be able to do on the client side, but for them to do as professionals and individuals themselves. So I want to be able to have us all be able to speak to our direct audiences really well. And in that process that include each clinician being able to speak to the brand really.
Okay. So you got 2 folds there then. Topics that clients could listen to, or people that are in the beginning stages of maybe seeking out actual therapy, but maybe they're going to dabble and listen to a podcast first. It's safer, less commitment. And then you have that other side of potentially some of your guesting could be focused on other newer clinicians who are in that transition and supporting them. So it's like two separate things. Is that right?
Yes. And funny enough, I started a podcast myself last year.
Okay.
But I experienced a lot of nerves, and I'm a mom of 2 under 2. So it hasn't really picked up the way that I necessarily have wanted to, but I have episodes queued. So I think this will also give you some practice to be able to sit in that host seat as well.
Yes, I get that so much. I have 3 kids myself. Well, one thing with your topics, you have a speaking page on your website. It's a long list, and that probably works really well with different types of speaking gigs that you do in person or presentations. In the podcast space, one suggestion to take with you would be bundle some of them together or write them as an episode title potentially and shorten that list down. So if there's a point when you start reaching out to podcasts, shorten it into more of the parts that really excite you, that you have a lot of expertise in, maybe the parts you're most passionate about. And so that makes it a little bit more narrowed down for a host to say yes to. So I wrote a few out. One would be like, you don't heal alone, how trauma lives in our relationships, from blame to accountability, a trauma-informed way to repair relationships, why most communication problems are actually safety problems. So it's more of like a episode title.
Or text those?
Yes, I will.
That's amazing. Those are great.
Yes, I for sure will do that. Oh, I love it when it hits and it's like, oh, you got it.
It hits home perfectly.
Yes, good. And that's just going to make it easier. The link you sent me is amazing. And right away for the listeners, I emailed you back like, do you need this coaching session? Because you have it going on. This is so well done. This is so professional. And then we talked further of, hey, I do want to know a little more strategy. I do want to know this. Just know like not everybody comes in with all that, which contributes to me being able to pull out some topics for you that are so spot on because you did that work ahead of time. I will for sure send you those. So one question I would have then, because I know your main question is how do we effectively weave this into the conversation when you're on the podcast? And also then that next piece of encouraging the listeners to reach out to you, to come into your, either whether it's virtual space, online space, or in person, into your community and your space. So one question I would have is, do you have something that you could navigate the Align listeners to go to? So for me, I have a free community and it's a podcast matchmaking community, I call it. So it's for hosts that are looking for guests and guests that are looking to speak on podcasts. There's an ongoing small form that each one fills out and then the other one has access to. So they can instantly see who's looking for guests, what topics they're looking for, that kind of thing, and can reach out there. So that's my way to grab that email, start to nurture them in my email list. And so that's my progression. Do you have something that would make sense to you in your niche?
So I have a scheduling link that takes folks directly to my calendar that can be found on my bio page on my website. So it'll allow folks to just go in and pick a 30-minute free time to meet with me to learn about what I do and see if it's a good fit. At this point in time, I'm not actively taking on a bunch of new clients. I'm working on building up my team. So my role has been kind of facilitating that process so that I'm able to say, okay, after looking at the 4 of us who are available, I know you picked me, but I'm really going to tell you this person's actually the best option because of A, B, and C. That is the kind of the,
yes,
I guess the gateway in. And I also have a resource directory that I'm building on my website.
Perfect.
That right now has all of the crisis resources, but I have also built I don't want to call it a course. I don't think that's fair, but it essentially is a 5-day email prompt that you get every day that's based in journaling. So you're able to get a sense of what we would talk about in therapy sessions and how you would reflect in therapy sessions. And it's specifically the one that I built is for life transitions. It's there. I'm too scared to publish it. I'll be very frank about that. It's sitting in my kit, my kit account, but that would be kind of like the freebie that I'm adding in. And my hope is to add a bunch of little freebies like that and episodes and things like that so folks are able to learn about me and my team.
That's perfect. And I think you should publish that. I think that looks great. I think it's such a great starting point. I have done therapy and I just know that it sometimes feels big, scary, big commitment. But if you could start with a 5-day journaling, it just makes perfect sense in that building up to then going to therapy. So that would make a lot of sense and looks very cohesive to me in your messaging and then what you offer in your actual business. So that would be great to do. As you build more of those, my recommendation for when you're on a podcast is to choose the one resource that matches the best for that topic that you're going to do on that show. Sometimes what happens is I've had a client before and she had, let's say, 5 amazing free resources, and I looked at them all and they truly were so valuable. But if you mention them all in just one podcast episode, it tends not to hit, or it leaves people with too many choices and leaves them, they don't take action. So I have learned through myself and my clients that it is best if we can send them one place, and then once they're there, we can support them with those other pieces that make sense to them, or they can find them by heading to the website or things like that. But that will be just one thing to think about as you grow that resource library, which is going to be so helpful to your clients. And then I think the next thing when I was going through materials of the form you sent me was being that you have so many degrees and so, that the high academic part, that a lot of times then when we get on a podcast, it's often more laid back and it's often people without that expertise listening. So one thing that's going to be helpful is figuring out what kind of language is going to land best, that is easier to understand for people that are just coming in. Or if that's not the people you're looking for, then it's getting on those specific podcasts that are going to have people listening that have been in therapy, that are further along in that journey. So it's deciding who is that audience, and that way you can tailor how you speak to a different level of different audience people. Does that make sense?
That does make sense. I think the podcasts that I've been on have mostly been with other therapists, and we know we're talking to the client audience. So it's usually been less jargon heavy, fortunately. So I think I have a little bit of practice with that. But if it was a podcast for I guess I've been on one podcast that was for other therapists. And that I think was a little tough because it was a little jargony. It was similar to this actually, where it was like a podcasting coaching session. She's my business mentor, my business coach, and she's also a therapist. So I think there are a couple of experiences where that may...
Yes, that makes sense. And then the next part would be, the way that getting your topics and your business woven into the talk naturally, it starts with the questions, in my opinion. So I host my own show, obviously, and then I also guest on shows. That's my marketing that I choose that works best for me. So you think about the questions that a host could ask you, and I like to think about it in 3 parts: connect, shift, and then your method. And so connecting is that beginning part where you use your own story, and that's where you're relatable and you're telling a story. You're not telling your whole life story, but you're picking out those pieces, that are going to be like, she's me, I'm her, that kind of feeling where we get that initial connection and we want to keep listening because now we're connected. And then that middle part is that shifting. So that's where we can show often a mindset that needs to be shifted or changed or reframed. This is where you can share myths about the topic or misconceptions about a topic, doubts people have, and then go into, why you don't subscribe to those. Or then the method then is your expertise. And that's usually where that value comes in. That's where you have, 1 to 3 actionable things that the audience or the listeners could do or could reflect on. And that's where you can put that heavier piece of, this is what I do and this is what helps my clients with this. So you can kind of think those 3 things. So like an example, a connecting question might be like, what first drew you into working with identity-based and relational trauma? You can share, the why behind there, or give an example either from your own life, or obviously you can't share clients. I understand that in here, but if you can tell some kind of story of like, what was that pivotal moment of why you got into this? That's that connecting piece. A shifting question might be like, how is accountability different from blame and healing? And sharing those thoughts. And then a method question could be, what are a few trauma sensitive practices anyone can use in a relationship? Or what's one boundary practice that helps people heal faster? Something like that, whether it's a journal and we think about value and giving value to an audience differently, in that I want to give every tip I have and give them as much as value as I can. But then you think about that listener at the end of that show feeling very overwhelmed and probably like, well, I can't do all of this, so I can't do any of it. Versus if we give 2 clear things, then they can feel very empowered. That sounds easy. I could do that. And it's getting them that quick win, that step in the right direction. Because when the questions are on point, then it's easier for the conversation to naturally
flow.
Yeah. And for you to get to speak to your business.
Right. Because historically, folks have asked about just me. And I found, and I think this is a question that I have many times when I get invited to be on podcasts, the questions tend to be more about me, the human.
Okay.
Than less about the business as a whole, because I think there's something they saw about me that they liked. And so I don't know how to shift that so that I'm able to, yes, answer their question, but then also talk about the brand at the same time. That I also talk.
Interesting. That could be the podcast. So maybe it's not being on the right podcast. My understanding then would be that podcast is more about like storytelling and maybe highlighting you as a female entrepreneur or something like that.
Yeah, either as a female entrepreneur or a female therapist or someone who's teaching other therapists. Yeah.
Okay. And so more about sharing like how you got into business versus sharing like, give me some tips of your expertise.
Correct. Yeah. I've maybe been on one or two that have been like actual like tips.
Yeah.
Like these are things you can immediately take.
Then to me, that's definitely the show that you're on. Not saying that those are wrong or bad, but if you're wanting to use this specifically to share the brand, share the business, and raise awareness that way, you're going to want to look more so for shows that their episode topics are maybe they do cover different pieces or kinds of therapy or mindset work. And then they do want you to share specific about life transitions. And they want that. There's tons of podcasts out there. I guarantee there's plenty out there for this type of thing, but it's going to be finding those.
When I look up podcasts, and this is probably a rookie question, and I see that they haven't recorded an episode in 6 months, a year, whatever it may be, or there's no way to contact them. Yes, I'm in your podcasting community, and so I'm able to see those, so I know those are active, but I think I don't know how to know whether a podcast is actually actively taking on guests.
Yes, great question. You're right. If you see that they don't have any episodes for X amount of time, they're likely either paused or done or have changed. Maybe they have a different show. So yes, something there has likely happened. Often you can find their social media if you dig a little, and maybe they've shared on there that they took a break. In general, if I'm looking through shows or trying to find them for my clients and I see that people haven't published an episode in a few months, then I usually just move on because it's likely that they aren't, or they are not as consistent as you would want to spend your time with. Does that make sense? Like, because maybe you get on and they choose to record with you, but now they're not someone that produces a weekly episode, or, you know, life is kind of chaotic and that happens. And they're maybe more of, we post when we feel like it, when we get to it. And you're going to want to stick to the ones that are consistent and that are in it. And that, you know, what, you know, if you record with them, they're going to air the episode, you know, in some type of timely fashion. That's just going to not let you waste time. And you don't want to waste time doing this. We only have so much time. So no, you're absolutely right. If they haven't produced an episode in quite some time, then I usually just keep moving on and find something else. To me, it's like a breadcrumb trail when you start searching. One, Threads is a great place, especially since people can add the podcast link to their profile now. That's super helpful in finding some of those more independently run shows. You know, if you go to Apple Podcasts or Spotify and you search a topic, you tend to get big production, famous people, big companies, and that's usually not who we're trying to guest with and collaborate with. It's finding some of those smaller shows to begin with, and then following the magic within that maybe they have a guest on who also hosts their own show. Then you hop over to their show. And so that could be time consuming. I do that work then when I send my clients on the podcast tour. I go and find that and do that for them because that can be that time consuming part. If it's something you want to dabble in, that's kind of the process. Threads is a great place. And then, you know, if you do get on a show that you really enjoy or you connect with that host, it's totally appropriate to ask if they know any other podcast hosts that might be a good fit that you could reach out to, because a lot of times we know each other because it's what we do. So that can help snowball that for you, get that momentum going. Yeah. What other questions do you have that I can answer before we're done here?
Yeah. I find that my strength in marketing my practice is through networking.
Mm-hmm.
So like I'm now digging into like hosting events for my practice. So we're having some for therapists and like kind of putting some podcast episodes together with some other like community partners. And I wonder if having your own podcast, if that naturally makes you a more reputable source for things. Or is that just a naive assumption to me?
No, I do think you're right in assuming that, because there's a lot of people with podcasts, but not everybody has them. Not everybody's consistent with them. And it does take a lot of work to produce a podcast. Not a lot. It can be as much work as you want to make it, depending on how much editing, it can be as much or as little and simple as you want it. But it does give you that layer of authority because you're someone that is speaking on it on a regular basis. Networking is great because you can invite people that you want on the show and it automatically lets you deep dive in conversation with them. That's one thing I love about podcasting, but that perception is definitely there where it gives you that extra credibility. I think in the world of AI and not knowing what's real and what's not, a podcast goes so much further than just social media or a picture that you post can do because somebody is at the bare minimum listening to you for an extended amount of time. And it's really hard to fake that for that amount of time, right? You can do a 7-second reel and fake that. You can't really do that.
Yes.
Yeah. And if you are, they're going to know because you'll likely be reading something and they'll hear it. But a lot of podcasts have that video. And so that's another layer of someone getting to see your mannerisms and see, you as a person. So I do think there is truth in that. I also say do what you can manage because I never want people to feel burnt out. Like I have to do this. This is the next thing to do. But if you're feeling called and you feel like you have things to share, I love it. I love that a podcast can do that for you. And it could potentially down the line be a good resource, a free resource for clients to go check out an episode or other people, the clinicians that you work with, that they can go and listen as well. So it can really be this great resource that's very easy for you to share. And it can be as consistent as you want to make it. So weekly is awesome if you can get to that. But if it's one a month, whatever, if you're clear about that with your audience and they know what to expect, that's the best that I find being in the podcasting world for over 4 years now, that we want to get in that consistency, but whatever it is that we can manage without feeling like this is horrible. Why did I decide this?
Yeah. And the last question that I have is I've seen some podcasts charge guests.
I have too.
Is that customary? Because the reasoning I got was like, we're putting you out there. But I'm like, the free ones also put me out there. So what's the difference between you charging me? And I get it. It's people's livelihood. I can understand that piece. But like, is that common? Or like, should I expect that in the process?
I don't think you should expect it. I have heard that and it's happened to me a couple of times as well. And I've turned all of those down. I get it because it takes time to edit, produce an episode, and then get things ready to share on social media. And to me, the collaboration is that you're going to share my show with your audience. That's kind of the agreed upon thing. So I'm benefiting from your audience. You're benefiting from my audience because I'm telling my audience to trust you. That's enough for me. That's the networking. That's the collaboration. And if we have a great talk, then you're going to come top of mind when someone comes to me and says, do you know someone that can help with me with X, Y, and Z, and vice versa. And we're going to end up referring each other. So the ripple effects to me are there naturally. And I don't feel good about charging for that or paying for that. So I've always turned that down. I've only seen it very little. And there's plenty of us out there that don't do that and would say it kind of just feels a little icky. So if it feels not worth it to you, then I think trust your gut and find a different one because that's kind of what I've done too. Yeah, I agree with you.
I tried to get down as much as possible. But I'm assuming you're going to email me all the other things.
Yes, definitely. If we were doing a full podcast tour, then I would get all these topics and things to talk about. I would email it to you. I'd give you a tracker full of podcasts and things like that. So I'm going to send you a blank tracker that you can start putting in shows so that you can keep track of that in your process. And then I will send you this list too, and you can take from it what fits and what feels best.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thanks for being on. I can't wait to hear your voice and see your message spread this year through this.
Appreciate it.
Hey, before you go, if you've ever wished podcast guesting or hosting felt a little easier, you're going to love this. I started a free podcast matchmaking community where hosts and guests can actually connect, swap shows, and find aligned conversations without all the cold pitching and chaos. It's totally free, it's super fun, and it's growing every day. So whether you're looking to grow your audience, get in front of the right people, or just finally get your message out there, come join us. You can find the link in the show notes to join the community.